Hey, what's up guys? Sorry we haven't been doing any videos for a while. A lot of that's on me. I've been doing a number of things, but unfortunately I don't always think to do it in front of a camera. I just sit down and I do things, and if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, then I just go back to the drawing board. And I really should have been doing a lot more of that in front of the camera, just so that people can benefit from it and see how to do some things. So trying to get back at that. We've received a number of requests, so hopefully we'll be getting to those and be able to really show you how to do a lot of things. Given the virus outbreak that is going on with COVID-19, necessity is the mother of invention. So what we've been focusing on right now is actually just creating masks. So I'm going to run you through that. Now you're going to need a few things for creating a mask. First of all, you're going to have to come up with a template. Here I just basically drew it on some notebook paper until I came up with something that I thought was going to work pretty good. You're also going to need some cutting supplies and equipment. So here's my cutting board. Here's a little acrylic ruler that I use for making a lot of the cuts when we're doing any of the fabric stuff. And then one of the greatest things known to man, in my opinion, for doing any sort of cosplay with fabric is your little pizza cutter roller here that cuts through that fabric. It's so much smoother, so much easier than using scissors. And then of course you're going to need a sewing machine so that you can get everything put together right. So I'm going to run you through, one other thing, obviously you're going to need some fabric. So it's good to roll with two different kinds of fabric. I have the closer weaved fabric here of going with woven tight fabric for the inside, and then on the outside for more of a fun design, we're going with this fabric here. Now with this fabric, it has like a two-way stretch going on with it, which means that it's not very good for filtering. So you want that closer knit fabric as well for that double layer, but this fabric gives it that fun, neat look. You can see in there it's got that honeycomb design. Now this is expensive fabric, so I wouldn't recommend just going out and getting really expensive fabric just for making masks. But if you have scrap that's laying around, in this case it was scrap from a black Superman suit that I had made, and just had some scraps left over, so that's what we're going to make these masks out of. I would recommend just really looking for what you have lying around instead of going out and spending a bunch of money to make these masks. And you can still make them fun, still make them, I guess, as stylish as possible as a mask can be. So let's get into it. Okay, so when you're going to be doing the cutout for using your template, you're going to lay down one piece of fabric, and you're going to want it laying one direction, and then you're going to take the other fabric and lay it down in the opposite direction there. So then you have the two layers. Now if you have enough fabric going on to where you can just make folds, that actually makes it a lot easier, because you can just fold it up, put your template on, cut it out, and then you're going to have the opposing sides just fine. However, like I said, I'm using scraps, so it kind of does make it a little bit more difficult. And then once you have that laid out, you just take your pizza cutter and you just cut around it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that cut and then show you the end result. Okay, so I cut those patterns out, and now I've got two pieces of the decorative fabric going in opposite directions so that they can be, you know, both sides of the mask there. And then I've got the inside fabric. Now this fabric, it doesn't really have one side versus another, so I didn't have to worry about that as much. But now we're just going to take the inside fabric and pin it to the outside fabric. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you don't cover up the outside, so you can still have that decorative design on the outside. So basically you're going to be pinning it so that you have the one fabric where it's going to be facing the outside, and then the inside fabric lined up against that. And you're just going to run through with some pins and just pin those together so that it's fairly simple to run it through your sewing machine. Now to do that, you simply just line up the edges. I like to start with the flat edge because that's what's going to be a big decider on making sure that all of this is pinned up the way it needs to be. And you don't actually need a lot of pins to do this. Really just kind of like one pin per side is going to be enough to get that accomplished. It's kind of difficult to try to pin this to where you guys can see it and I can see it, but once you pin that edge, I like to then go up and make sure that I am lining up the top where you have this curve going up, because that's kind of a little bit of a critical junction there. You want to make sure that that lines up as best as possible to just save you some headaches down the road. Then just go and pin the other side where it's mostly flat, and then finish off with that curve along the bottom of the mask. And now that that's pinned together, it is time to run it through the sewing machine. So I'm gonna start with the flat edge as I line this up and turn the sewing machine on, and then you really only need to have to worry about going with about about a 1/4 inch of a seam, and it's not really like super critical to do like the double stitching or anything like that with this first step, because as you're going through you're gonna just sew these two pieces together, but then you're also going to be folding over the edges and making it smoother again. So that first stitch, it can just be a single stitch, it doesn't have to be the double, it'll just be enough to get it together. Okay, now that you have your two pieces of fabric sewn together, where you have the inside edge and the outside, or not inside edge, but inside material, outside material all combined, now it's time to put the two pieces together. Now for this, you're going to want to put the outside pieces together and sandwich them up, so then on the either side of it, you're just seeing the inside of that fabric. And once you have that lined up, then you're going to take some pins and you're just going to run it through there so that you have the edges lined up, you're pinning it together so that you can then run it through the sewing machine and have these facing the right direction. So for this, I just do a couple of pins just to make sure that it stays nice and good there along the edges. And what you're going to want to do as you're making the sew this time is not just, you don't want to start at the top and you want to start going down, but instead of going all the way around again, you're going to want to reach to the bottom and then sew out just a little bit more. So it's coming at an angle and holding it together about here. And what that's going to do is it's going to keep the fabric together so it comes under the chin before making the split and going in either direction. So once you have that pinned up, now it's time to run it through the sewing machine and make these two pieces into one piece. You can see the beginning of the results for that. So if you were to take this and then flip it out, then you would have that mask to where you have the outside face there. You could put it on and you can see how it's basically going to fit over the face. Now, we don't have it all finished yet, so we got to keep going. And one of the first steps that you're going to want to do then is you're going to want to take some scissors and cut as close to the stitch as possible along this seam, because when you start folding those edges over to make a nice smooth rounded end, that's going to create a problem at the top if you don't cut that excess off first. So you're just going to want to go and make your cuts. You'll be ready to start folding that over and making your nice clean rounded edges. So what I like to do first is start with the outside edge, and you're just basically gonna fold that over and then sew it in. So then on the outside, you're just gonna have that nice rounded edge and it's gonna be held nice and neat. Now you don't really have to pin for this, you can really just kind of eyeball it. I like to fold it over so I can see the original stitch just a little bit. Just there along the edge, I put it in the machine, and then I'm just going to run that needle right along that same seam that I've already created. So then you can see right there on the edge it's basically provided just that double stitch already, but even still, we're going to be folding the other edges over as well, and so it's really going to make it nice and secure once we get to the end. So I'm just going to do the same edge, or the same thing with the other edge. Just drop the guard down, run it through the machine. Now I've got both edges, and then the bottom is a little bit tricky because since it comes together in this V already, you just basically take that edge and you fold it over, and it's going to be real tight there on the one side, but you just got to kind of fold it over as close to that V as possible, and it does make it so it gets a little bit thicker as you go. And then you have that nice good edge there. Now we're just going to do the same thing with the other side. Just fold it over and run it through the machine. Now we got the bottom taken care of, and it's time for the top. The top is a little bit more complicated than the other, so that's why I was kind of saving it for the end. Just because when you reach the peak there where it's going right above the nose, it's going up and then coming back down, and so trying to fold that edge over can be a little bit of a pain. But if you go nice and slow, once you reach the top, you just start with the one side, you fold it over, you run it through the machine, and then you reach the other part, slow down, fold that over, and then run it through the machine again, so it'll go all the way along that top edge and have it have a nice seam as well. So what I did at the top is after I had gone through and made sure we had that nice rounded edge all the way around, I just did a reinforcement stitch there right at the top, going down, then double stitching and going back over it. That way it has a lot of strength there, because that is the place where it's pulling across the nose, and it's just going to have a little bit more wear and tear, specifically as you're flipping it inside and outside. But now that we have these edges done, it's time to get into the strings, because we have to have a way of securing this to our face. We can't just walk around hoping it'll stay on. So now that we have the main part done, now we're going to go on and do the strings so that we can tie this onto our head. Now to do the strings, you're going to want to have 4 pieces about 1 inch wide, and then I just cut these about 14 inches long. I have all 4 of these here, and now the trick then, especially with this material, since even though it's tightly knit, it has the tendency to kind of like fray out on the edges, and you don't want to have that where it's just a bunch of little loose strings that are springing out of these strings that are going around and tying this mess to your face. So to avoid that, you want to make sure that neither of these raw edges are going to be available. So to do that, or not available, but outside. So to do that, what you're going to do is you're just going to take it over and fold just a little bit of an edge there. I'd say about a, I don't know, about 1/4 inch on either side. And if you're just pressing down really good as you're making this fold and running your finger along the edge there, what you'll be able to do is make it so that there's a nice good seam, which you can then, or a nice good fold, which you can then use when you're running it through the machine. So you just do that on one side, flip it over, and then do it again on the other side. And what I'll show you when I get done with this is even as I'm just going and making these folds on these edges, you can really see the importance of that, because just running my fingers along the edges here, pressing down and just pulling as I'm making this seam here, you can see that all these little strings here are starting to pop up and fray out. So that's why we're doing this, is to prevent that from happening, you know, specifically even not only as you're wearing it, but as you're washing it. So what you're going to do then is you're going to take these 2 different folds, fold them in on each other, and then fold it again. And so that's going to keep that edge there so that none of those little strings have the ability to fray out, because those edges will be buried inside of that stitch. So then once you have this fold made, then it's time to run it through the machine and to basically line it up really good in your machine before you begin the stitch. So again, you just take those folds, fold them together, and then fold that in on itself. You're going to want to hold that in really good, and then once you have that fold made, you just put it inside the machine, drop the guard, and then the rest of this is still hanging out. It's not folded in yet, but once you have that guard down, you can actually make your fold a good ways down before you even get the stitch started. And then once the stitch is started, then it's easier to run it through and keep that fold going, so that you're going to have a nice tight string that you can use for your mask. So once you've got it down a ways, then that enables you to just keep folding it, run that fold all the way through. Now, I can't move the camera and hold on to this at the same time, so what you're just gonna have to take me on faith right now that I'm running my hands all the way down, making sure that this fold is good, and then we're just gonna run it through. Started to come loose here a little bit. That's what happens when you're dealing with kind of just these small edge pieces of fabric. It's so much easier when you're working with larger pieces, because then you don't have to worry about these tiny little folds that you're trying to make come undone. But it really is important to make sure that you're doing this. Otherwise, like I said before, you're just going to end up with a bunch of strings hanging out that you're always going to either have to cut before you wear, or just walk around looking like a hot mess. Just did a quick little double stitch there at the end just to help hold it in, and now we have the first string. So we're just going to make 4 more of these and then attach it to the mask. Okay, so now we got all 4 of the strings done, which means it is time to put them on the mask. So to do this, what I like to do is make sure that I have the rounded part of the stitch up, or the rounded part of the string up top. And then, because the way the ties work, they go up and go over the ear on the top part. So what I like to do is just kind of make an angle here on the mask, so that it's just going to have like that natural direction going. Now you just basically put it in the machine at that angle, and then you just run it through, reverse direction, kind of do a back stitch. I like to do a final little bit at the end. Sometimes here at the end it can be a little tricky because it's very thick and it's kind of short there on that side, so it doesn't necessarily like to run through the machine. So you might have to do a quick little reset where you flip up the guard before finishing that. Okay, so ran that through, made sure that that was a nice strong stitch, and now it is at that angle, so it's going to be going up and over the ear. When we get down to the bottom, on the bottom piece, you can really just have that just go straight out as you're making that stitch. Now again, all these stitches are going to be on the inside here, so that then when you flip it out and you're wearing it the correct way, then you're just going to be seeing that string run into the mask instead of seeing where that stitch is. So I'm going to go ahead and do those other 3 strings, attach those, and then we'll show you the final product. It's done and it's time to put on. So basically you just put it on your face, take those strings at the top, just kind of tie them around at the top of your noggin, around on the back, and and you're good to go. You have this mask that you can wear around in public. I didn't fold it out all the way, so it kind of has a weird wrinkle there. And this will enable you to really be safe with your environment. Now, there are a couple of things to note when discussing these masks, and that's something that you need to understand, is with a fabric mask, it's not an N95 mask, so it's not necessarily going to stop any sort of, very minute microscopic viruses from getting in. Predominantly, this is going to be your way of protecting all those around you, because if you cough, if you sneeze, those droplets that would otherwise travel up to 6 feet and hang out in the air for up to 10 minutes, now those get caught inside your own mask, and it helps you to prevent any sort of spread. So it's always good to be responsible and think about others first. That's what these masks are designed to do, and that's what's going to make you responsible as you're going out in public. Which again, you really only want to be doing that as much as necessary, and not just because you're getting a little bit of cabin fever sitting at the house. Now, one other note to make for these masks is when I was cutting out the strings, I didn't want to insult your intelligence by showing you how to cut a really long rectangle. But when I used that clear acrylic ruler at the beginning, that made it life so much easier. I could just lay out the material, I could drop the ruler on top of it, on top of my cutting board, make those cuts really easy. So if you have something like that, it's really easy to utilize. If not, Walmart has them for really cheap. Otherwise, if you want to go the old-fashioned route, you can just make your measurements, make your marks, and then draw the lines. But I recommend going the other route just because it's going to save you a lot of time. We will get back to doing some cosplay as soon as possible. I am kind of sad, I should have done some filming. We did Black Lantern, Wonder Woman cosplay that we created, the black suit Superman. I was really excited about both of those, but I didn't put them in front of the camera, and I apologize about that. Moving forward, I'll try to be a little bit more conscientious about it. In the meantime, hopefully these masks will help you keep everybody around you safe. So take care, have a good one, and we will catch you next time.